Well, good morning, everybody. Let's go ahead and call this meeting to order. Clerk, please call the roll.
Members, please select that you are here on your tablet. Chair, we have a quorum with 11 members present and 4 members absent.
All right. Very good. Okay, thank you, everybody. Well, let's go ahead and begin with non-agenda public comment then. This provides 2 minutes for anyone who would like to comment on something that is not on today's agenda, but is within the purview of MTS. Clerk, do we have any non-agenda public comment?
We do. We have several. Salvador Abrica, please make your way to the podium.
Good morning, Chair Whitburn and board members. My name is Salvador Abrica. I am the political coordinator for Teamsters Local Union number 542. We represent 200 plus of your MTS TransDev employees at the Copley Park facility, consisting of mini fixed drivers, paratransit drivers, reservationists, technicians, fuelers, and washers. As you can see with me, I have our principal officer, Jaime Vasquez, our business agent, Don Mack, and the shop stewards representing that facility. In full support of what we need to get done here. And the point that I'm addressing today is the topic you took up last month for insourcing. The study of what can be done or not done, pros and cons of insourcing the MTS outsourced facilities. So I'd like to begin with recognizing that you have followed through on your commitment to study the feasibility of insourcing transit operations, item 26 of your September 12th, 2024 meeting, covered a presentation that identified a project team, project goals, and project timeline. What it fails to identify is the committee we requested on July 27th, 2023. The committee should include members from the workforce, labor representatives, MTS staff, in order to accomplish the goals that were set within this presentation. A working committee is needed to facilitate the cohesive team effort to identify the true feasibility by addressing the key focus areas on page 5 of the presentation. How can we expect to have a complete picture if all of the stakeholders are excluded in the process? Moving forward, can we count on you to direct MTS staff in establishing this committee? So that's on the presentation from last month. And then on a side note, the safety committee, so we would like to know if a safety committee has been established according to CFR.
Next is Alex Wong. Alex, please unmute yourself now.
I applaud MTS's decision to accelerate increasing late-night trolley frequencies to 15 minutes system-wide. This will allow low-income workers who currently drive to work at graveyard shifts to switch to transit. MTS should also increase mid-coast frequencies in June 2025. I am concerned that MTS may delay 7.5-minute frequencies on the mid-coast in order to balance deficits. I ask MTS to reconsider this decision. Increased frequency shortens travel times, alleviates overcrowding, and helps passengers feel safer. After all, in 2023, 84% of trolley Part 1 crimes and nearly 2/3 of Part 2 crimes happened at stations rather than on board trolleys. Increasing mid-coast frequencies to 7.5 minutes is an excellent investment. It only costs $3.7 million annually to do so, and the Blue Line has lower per passenger subsidies than nearly every MTS bus route. And with Blue Line ridership growing by 11.4% in the past fiscal year alone, 7.5-minute mid-coast frequencies cannot come sooner. Speaking of frequencies, I also want to reiterate that it is very, very, very important that we do not have the new airport's rail connection share tracks with any existing rail lines, because currently the way that's the airport trolley connection is set up is that it will share tracks with the Green Line through downtown, and that it will merge onto the existing Green and Blue Line tracks right before Little Italy, right around Hawthorne. And that is a huge that is just a no-go. That is just something that will severely limit frequencies, because that, whenever you have one pair of tracks merging onto another pair of tracks, that will create a huge bottleneck. And we all know that bottlenecks limit capacity and frequency that could be better used to serve the Green Line in Mission Valley, for example.
Next is a phone number ending in 3731. Please dial *6 to unmute yourself.
Hey, truth is, MTS is hurting for money. Why was there a writer appreciation event in September giving away taxpayer-funded donuts, coffee, mugs, and pens? You guys only show appreciation one day of the year. I'm also concerned that Global is writing MTS's press releases because the news scripts all claim that the copper line is an extension for East County, which is a lie. It goes nowhere new. It's not even a line. It's a stupid shuttle. And I tested it from several areas, and my experience was that the copper shuttle barely pulled into Santee. Why make people walk or roll further? What's the point of the rest of the track now? What's the plan? Because I saw workers working on the tracks. The copper shuttle left late by 5 minutes. From El Cajon, the green was another 9-minute wait. Then another green arrived, and there was no copper. So Global, that means no AC or heat to wait in. There was only one small shaded area to wait near the copper, and additional structure isn't going to be needed. The orange line was a 13-minute wait. That's 18 minutes wasted. I could have driven almost anywhere in that time. The copper shuttle turned a 55-minute trip to downtown into a 1 hour and 7-minute long trip for Ron's people. Now tested from other areas to see if the overall system worked better. From North County on the coaster to Old Town, there were 17 to 19-minute waits for all trolleys. Around the South Bay, the blue was a 16-minute wait. From 12th and Imperial, there was a 17-minute wait to or from America Plaza, a 17-minute wait for the orange line, and a 30-minute wait for the green line. The latter is unacceptable. The test I did showed no increase in service as claimed by MTS. So what's the backup plan if this continues? Or is MTS okay with deterring riders? On another note, I would like MTS to do more outreach before deciding on future murals. There should be regular people's input taken via surveys and MTS booths, with people given a few different options of art to provide input on it before a mural suddenly appears somewhere that has no meaning to the riders. It's public transit, not city transit. Something to remember. Thank you.
That concludes public comment, Chair.
Thank you, Clerk. Let's go ahead and move on to our consent items. Those are items 3 through 24 on the agenda. Clerk, is there any public comment on the consent items?
We do. Salvador Abrica, please make your way to the podium.
Good morning, Chair Whitburn and board members. Salvador Abrica, Political Coordinator for Teamsters Local 542. I'm addressing agenda item 24 as it raises concerns as to the practice where public transportation has been outsourced, the practice where the contractor approaches the transit authority for an increase to the negotiated agreement has become increasingly common. We agree that attracting and retaining qualified talent is a challenge. However, we would disagree that it started in 2021. This has been a long-standing issue through several collective bargaining agreements where the contractor has maintained their low wages in order to increase their profit margin, which brings me to the concerns that we would like to address. In order to properly align the pay structure for frontline employees and before the approval of the $1.365 million annual increase, we request an explanation of the following. A review of the current pay structure conducted by MTS be provided to us, identify transitive employees who received a market rate adjustment, identify the 6 CBAs that have not received equitable compensation, provide us with the proposed transitive increases by unit, job classification, and hourly increase. Most importantly, I would request that you ensure that the requested monies go directly towards employee wages. You know, we went through this once already, and the argument was the company was providing a $2 increase and was trying to leverage us to extend the contract, the collective bargaining agreement, using your money. So what we're addressing here is the fact that any money is given by this authority to as an increase should go directly to the employees and not have any money shaved off the top for business purposes. That has already been negotiated. That has not changed. The only thing that's changed is that wages.
Your time has expired. Next is phone number in 3731. Please dial *6 to unmute yourself.
Okay, item 2, the minutes say Marcus and Todd were absent, but I had no way of knowing that because there was no verbal roll call. Attendance was also not shown on the video, so some transparency is needed on attendance. It says 4 written comments from Ride SD. We're advocating for 7.5-minute frequencies. Why not 5-minute frequencies? Who writes these scripts? Item 4, I'm curious if any of the spinning went to the tracks the copper line shuttle is no longer using. Are they being repaired or removed so the metal can be sold and MTS can keep stalling the fiscal cliff that was brought on by running the agency off a mental cliff? Item 8, it's alleged that there are failing driveway panels, but looking at the pictures, they don't look that bad. I've seen much worse trolley tracks. Item 10, another $1 million for special event security is definitely needed, but equity is missing for those who are regular working customers versus one-time event goers who choose to ride versus have to ride. Perhaps more so on the northern part of the Blue Line, which just had 2 incidents of violence. Item 11, Zebs and Bebs are such a waste of tax dollars, but the fact that there's an MTS facility with a driveway that buses can't easily drive out of, what else can be expected of MTS? Item 14, $510,000 for Google Mapping app. It'd be nice if this was finally going to get those MTS signs aligned with the actual arrival time, because that's why people hated MTS's trip planning tool. It was also junk. Item 17, yes to $539,000 for 350 bus benches. I wouldn't sit on 50% of them due to cleanliness concerns, but they're still needed. Item 23, passenger revenue up from last year isn't much, especially when you compare that 9.2% to the ridership at 15.9%. I recommend getting that copper shuttle sponsored. Item 24, $1.3 million a year in Transdev wage increases. I figured out that the unnecessary long breaks for the copper, green, and orange hub in El Cajon is really to cater to the Transdev foreign political unionists over the riders having faster frequencies. 7.5, never happening. Stanex 10 minutes, never happening. That's what I've written.
That concludes public comment, Chair.
Thank you very much, Clerk. All right, is there a motion to approve the consent items? All right, we have a motion by Director Gastel. Is there a second to approve the consent items? We have a second from Director McCann. Any further discussion?
Just a reminder, if the board members would like to speak, you can get in the queue by tapping the discussion. Press this button here. There you go.
Chair Pro Tem Montgomery Stepp.
Monica, if you don't press your button. Don't turn it on now. Yeah. Right.
Okay. All right, there we go. I just wanted to ask about item number 24. On the agenda, there's a 2-page explanation, but there's no breakdown of where the 1.3 million could be potentially going to. And it does indicate that it's an up to amount, which generally it's on a public agenda at this point, the amount. So what does that do for us as MTS to say, we can go up to this amount and kind of announce that publicly. And then we don't have backup material to show where that is going and what the relationship is to the decisions that we've made in the last couple of years with TransDev.
Yes, so this is directly related to the decisions we made previously with their other bargaining units. So what we're doing here, we did a thorough analysis to make sure that TransDev is providing the same levels of investment in their workforce that they promised us they would do in the bid that they gave us when we awarded the contract. So we already did that analysis, and then we determined what would it take to get these 6 bargaining units that they're currently discussing up to the level of investment that this board authorized the last time for the other bargaining units. And so this will directly provide up to $1.3 million a year. And the reason we don't know exactly what it is because it's based on how many people are currently in that bargaining unit. So for instance, we looked at how many were intended in the bid for the number of employees, but some of those positions have not been filled because those positions have not been needed for the levels of service that they currently have. So MTS determines how many routes they have. MTS determines what level of service we want them to have. In the case of Copley Park, those drivers are brought on as the need increases. So it's an on-demand service. And for paratransit, we have not been getting to the levels of pre-pandemic as we had anticipated when we wrote the contract. So it's really a factor of how many people are currently employed at those two, at the locations where the bargaining units are. And so these bargaining units include road supervisors, dispatchers, technicians, utility, bus stop techs and power washers, at the South Bay, El Cajon, bus maintenance facilities, as well as at Copley, reservationists, mechanics, utility, road supervisors, router, scheduler, dispatcher, and office clerk. So these are the units that were not provided the $2 per hour that the board authorized outside of the negotiating agreements, just as a way to really help us to gain more drivers. And then also what we negotiated with TransDev the last time this came up.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Chair Goebel.
Turn green. Oh, there it is. Thank you. Following up on the supervisor's question, how do we know that TransDev doesn't take a percentage off the top for overhead? If it's a full 1.3 million, how do you know TransDev doesn't take 300,000 for themselves, but leaving just $1 million for actual wage increases?
Finance, can you speak to that question?
What contractually are they allowed? And are we allowed to restrict any funds that we give for a specific purpose?
I'll let Larry answer as to kind of the financial analysis issue, but the way that the authorization is worded for the board, we wouldn't actually amend their contract to give them those extra funds until they showed us the bargaining agreements that they negotiated that then show us where those dollars are going, because it is intended only to go directly to the employees and not to other buckets.
Then once they show us the backup, this is how many people we have, this is how many dollars of increase they're going to get, that's the total amount.
Yes.
Then when we give them money, are they contractually bound to give the money for that? Or can they say, well, that includes 20% for our overhead?
Larry, do you want to talk to that?
Yeah, what's going to happen is they're going to go through a collective bargaining agreement perspective. We're going to actually see the results of that collective bargaining agreement to ensure that those dollars are going directly to their employees. We're going to take that information and we're going to actually establish a cost per revenue mile just as the contract is awarded based upon the impact of those collective bargaining agreements. So it's going to be embedded within the rate that we pay TransDev, but it's all going to be in accordance with the CBA that's been agreed upon, where all of those employees are receiving their full compensation.
And the way the contract works is they only get paid for what they operate. So as they invoice us for the number of miles, and then our contract services division makes sure that those are the number of miles that they operated. So that's why it's an up to amount, because it's really based on what they operate.
But I think the key word is agreement. That means both sides have had a chance to agree upon this number before it goes forward.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
And in their agreements, they could decide to put that money to wages. They could decide to put it towards benefits. We're not going to interfere with that negotiation. So.
All right, is there any further discussion on the consent items? All right, if you hit your discussion, there you are. Your microphone should turn green in a second. Or at least the light on your microphone should turn green. There you go.
Thank you, Chair. And just as a quick question regarding this for some background information. So the $2 an hour increase was approved by the MTS Board of Directors years ago?
Yeah, which year was that?
Mike Wygant, Chief Operating Officer here at San Diego MTS. That was late. It went to in-house employees and contracted employees for operators. And I believe that was in December of 2022 to be applied in 23, but I'd have to go verify that, but I'm pretty sure that's when it was.
And is there a reason it wasn't applied in?
To those remaining 6, they weren't in negotiations and they weren't operators. So later on after that, it was discussed, as mentioned in the item, that there were some gaps, and now that they're in union negotiations, some of those positions on the contracted side, TransDev actually started paying that to be equitable, and is not asking, they've been paying it for like more than a year, is not asking to be reimbursed for that. But some very small group of those positions actually got raises that the board didn't authorize, but that came directly from TransDev.
I see. And similar to my colleagues' concerns, how do we make sure that, indeed if the board approves this, it actually goes into salaries of workers?
Yeah, so we've spent the good part of a month and a half or 2 months with the finance team and my team kind of diving through the financials that TransDev provided as part of their bid and what the proposal is. So we can see back in 2019, before COVID, before kind of the historic inflation numbers that we're seeing today, we could see what they were proposing each year as typical escalators for their labor force. And so we want to check 2 things. We want to make sure they're continuing to continue that investment. They're not using, if the board approves it, they're not using the board approved money to offset those raises, so they can't take that. But we can see what that number is, and when they're done with their collective bargaining agreement, we can see that. And then if this is approved, that $2 would go directly to them and from TransDev. It can't come from us. That would be a violation of dual employment. But it would be on top of the rates that were in their bid, so we can see that their money's on the table. And then every month we go through and we look at their payroll to verify that that's being allocated to them, that those wages are maintained. It'll be in their collective bargaining agreement, so they'll be obligated to pay it.
Right.
That $2 will be rolled into their CBA, or as Sharon had mentioned, wherever that equal investment goes.
Yeah.
It is not, it would not be ratified until contract amendments by this agency until after their CBAs are voted in and ratified. And we would, as Larry had mentioned, they would get it as they pay. In other words, per the labor rate for the service, or the hourly or mileage rate that's rolled into that service. So it's an annual number. And as the contract goes along, there's option years. If those aren't exercised, of course, we pay as we go. So none of that money would be allocated to them.
Yeah.
And once we get the results of the bargaining agreement, we will look at it and analyze it compared to what we were being promised by TransDev. And then we would then either sign the agreement to amend their contract because we agree that they have not supplanted their own obligations, or we would send it back to them and say, no, you didn't do enough.
Yeah.
So that's where, if we get the authorization, they can go to the bargaining table with their membership and to discuss what the membership would like to see that money to go to.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much for doing your due diligence. Very much appreciated. And thank you so much for everybody that spoke on the item in particular. And just so our knowledge, when does the contract that is currently in place expire?
One expires in 26, one expires in June of 26, and one of 27. And there are option years that the board would have the authority to exercise for two-year options. So as many as 4 more years past that.
I see. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Rodriguez. Any further discussion on the consent agenda? Seeing none, clerk, please take the vote.
The motion passes with 13 members voting yes and 2 members absent.
Thank you, clerk. That brings us to our discussion items, beginning with item 25, Fair Enforcement Diversion Program modifications. And we are going to invite Karen Landers to provide the presentation. Once you get settled in up there, please feel free to go ahead and begin.
Okay, good morning. Many of you have heard part of these presentations before, so I have a slightly shorter version. I'll try not to get too much into the weeds on this. But this is to talk about proposed permanent modifications to MTS's Fair Enforcement Diversion Program. Oh. Okay, sorry. So just to kind of take you back to what our current Fair Enforcement Diversion Program looks like, it's in kind of an extended pilot. The board approved it back in 2020, and we extended it in 2021. It technically expired as a pilot in August of 2022, but with the board's kind of tacit consent, we have continued it as is until the board tells us to, make changes. So today our proposals would be to make one modification to the program and then make it permanent so that it's no longer in this pilot status. But currently what that program looks like is for all fare evasion violations, unless there's another violation that's cited at the same time. So if we're setting someone for vandalism or assault or some other misconduct and they also don't have a fare, then you would not in that instance be eligible for diversion. But if the only thing you're cited for in that incident is fare evasion, then you have options to resolve it before we send it to court. And what we do is we physically keep the citation and don't ever enter it into the court system until this time period is over. But currently, a passenger, if they're caught without a fare, can immediately purchase a one-way ticket, either out of ticket vending machine or on a Pronto validation device, where if they have stored value on their Pronto account, the officer can tap it and it'll take that $2.50 off the account at that moment. Or they can receive a citation. And then this is where it's a little bit more like traditional diversion, that if they resolve that citation administratively with MTS within the first 120 days, then we don't send it to court. And it's a reduced fine. If it went to court, the citation itself by statute is $75, but there's a bunch of court fees that get added. So it's generally just under $200 if it gets to the court system. So for our diversion program, MTS offers that you can pay a reduced fine of $25. Or you can do 3 hours of community service, and that all just has to be completed within that 120-day period. We also do offer kind of an expedited limited appeal. So if somebody thinks that they should not have gotten the ticket for some reason, maybe they tried to purchase a ticket, but the vending machine wasn't working, or sometimes we get where they actually have a past product that's loaded, but they forgot to tap. They just send us that information. We verify that that was correct, and then we'll dismiss the citation pursuant to the appeal. And if they do nothing, then it goes, after 120 days, it gets sent to court, and it goes through the normal process of adjudication at the court. What we're here to talk about is to remove that first option to immediately purchase a one-way fare. And so instead, everyone would go through the more traditional diversion program itself. And just as a brief reminder, when MTS set up the diversion program, there were kind of two goals in place. We were cognizant of the reduction in fare revenue could result in budget deficit concerns or requiring us to either cut service or raise fares. I think the board is well aware that we are facing a structural budget deficit escalating to potentially $95 million in fiscal year 2029. And with the new data that we have from the Pronto fare system, we are currently calculating that we're losing between $10 and $13 million a year on a going forward basis from fare evasion. But we also, so we want there to be a penalty, or a consequence so that people have a incentive to pay their fares in advance. But we were very conscious of keeping providing a non-criminal path for people with a fare evasion, and also to try to more equitably and proportionally align the penalty with the actual violation. So by putting in place the $25 reduced fine and the community service option, we felt that more equitably aligned with the violation itself of purely fare evasion, as opposed to the full consequences of a criminal path. So to go over just some of the data on fare evasion statistics that are rising and the financial impact, I wanted to take you back to, we have the Pronto system starting in May of 2022, we started getting a lot more data. So we could really see what was happening. And one of the things that we've been seeing is that the stored value evasion rate, so people who are they're not buying a monthly pass in advance or something like that, they're paying as they go, as the Pronto system allows you to do. And so they may have money on their card and stored value, but they're not paying consistently every time. And so when our officers approach them to see if they have a fare, we have seen both a steady decline of people buying those pass products, those monthly passes, and instead shifting to using stored value. And so back in 2022, when the system was still new, we had about 29% of our customers were using pass products, and now we're down to about 20%. And then which is not unexpected because of the value of fare capping in the Pronto system, because it allows you to pay as you go. But what we are also seeing then is an increasing amount of people who are not paying even with stored value. So they may have stored value on their card, but they're not tapping and paying each trip. And so when our officers approach them and find them, it has steadily gone up. So, it started in 2022. At about 22% of people were using stored value, but had not tapped to pay their fare when our officer checked them. We're now, for calendar year 2024, at 32%. So it is increasingly being a concern. And just to kind of clarify, for the same time period that we're seeing, 32% of fare evasion for stored value, and this is mostly on Pronto or on trolley, because that's where our officers are patrolling and doing that. On bus, it's a little bit of a different system because the bus operator is there and acts as a gatekeeper when people get on the bus to make sure they pay. And we have consistently stated a 3% evasion ratio on bus. So for those evasion rates, we then try to use some of the data that we have, apply those evasion statistics and the buy on the spot statistics of how many people, if they were caught without a fare, then had our officer take a one-way fare off at the same time, and applied that to some of our revenue estimates. And what it has told us is that in the little over 2-year period from May 2022, when we have this data, to the July-August timeframe, we think that it equates to between $17 and $23 million of lost revenue. And because it's increasing, kind of the annualized estimate for calendar year 2024 is that it's somewhere between $10 million and $13 million in revenue lost each year, related to people who are not tapping before they get on their trip. We did want to look at this then from how many people. Is it only a few people? Is it a little people? And during this time period, we have 151,000 individual Pronto accounts who have bought a fare on the spot on this option. Now, 61% of those only did it once, but another 40% or just under 40% have bought more than once. And that equates to over 58,000 individual cards have more than once done and buy a fare on the spot. And part of that is really that under the current rules, there's nothing wrong with doing that. That we build in, it's okay if you don't have a fare. The worst thing that then we're going to ask you to do is buy a fare that one time. But since only between 3 and 6% of our passengers get inspected every month, then that means that it, maybe 5% of the time, so 1 in 20 times you pay your fare for the buy on the spot, but the other 19 times you don't have to because we weren't asked to. And then we've just also seen an increasing number of the average monthly number of on-the-spot payments has gone up. So for 2024, we're now at every month about 57,000 people buy, or maybe not that many people, but times does somebody buy an on-the-spot fare. So we have previously brought this to the board and to the Public Security Committee. The board at our meeting in June asked us to go back to the Public Security Committee first and have them review it and send you a recommendation on steps to make. And so at the September 20th Public Security Committee, that committee made a recommendation that the board remove the on-the-spot payment option from the diversion program. We also had, proposed and incorporated into that that we would implement an online and phone payment options to make paying that $25 fine much easier, because currently right now our program only allows payment either by check via mail or in person at the transit store. So by implementing online and phone payment options, that makes it much more consistent with similar parking and traffic ticket options and how to resolve those. And then the proposal is to make the diversion program permanent. And with that, I will take any questions.
Thank you. Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
We do. Manny Rodriguez, please make your way to the podium.
Good morning, board members. My name is Manny Rodriguez with City Heights Community Development Corporation. We're here to just express our concern with edits to the fare diversion program, as we believe it has helped a lot of folks in our communities, avoid harsher criminal records and steep penalties. And we're very thankful for the supervisor who's championed this a few years ago. We would also like to raise that fare diversion or evasion can oftentimes be the result of just the infrastructure. In a lot of stations, the Pronto reader is off to one side on the other side of the platform. There are times where the train is coming, I get to the station, and I'm not gonna cross the platform, walk to the other side, and tap my card or Pronto card. So it's also important to consider that we make sure that tapping is easy for our riders. I know MTS is taking steps towards that. Open payments was a great step toward that. But there's still the issue of the Pronto reader being on one side of the platform. I also would like to see, or we would all like to see, more data on where these evasions are happening. It could be possible that a lot of these evasions are just UC students going from, their campus station over to Nobel Drive. It's a one-stop trip for them, so they might not even be compelled to, tap their card. So I think it's important to figure out where these are happening. If it's in specific stations, then that can just be fixed by having an MTS employee there or some more education at that station. So I just want to share those thoughts and thank you all. And I hope you make a good decision that keeps our communities in mind for this. Thank you.
Next is Fausto Surposa. Fausto, please unmute yourself now.
Good morning. My name is Fausto Surposa. I'm with the Teamster 683. Real quickly, I just wanted to bring to the board. We've had a situation a couple weeks ago where a bus driver had a passenger on board right there, right under you guys at 12th and Imperial, where took out a knife, threatened a couple people. The situation was taken care of by security, but guess what? They put that same passenger back on board with the driver and forced the driver to continue with that passenger on board. Well, going from point A to point B, at point B, that person did the same thing at Irish Trolley Station. Took out the knife again was surrounded by police officers and ambulances. And what I'm asking is, what is the board waiting for? They're waiting for somebody to get stabbed and die? I don't understand why there's nothing in place where the security guards get that person off the bus and keep them off the bus. Why put them on and have the driver's life in jeopardy? I do not understand. Drivers go through stabbing, spitting, hitting, kicking, unwelcome sexual misconduct. Assaults on transit workers have tripled since 2008. And I want to know what the MTS board is doing or advising the security guards to do when a situation like this comes aboard. Having the passenger on board with the driver is a bad outcome. This needs to stop. We need more protection for the drivers. And it starts by the security not putting that passenger on the same bus with the driver. Thank you.
Phone number ending in 3731. Please dial *6 to unmute yourself.
Great comments. Someone told me that expecting people to pay $2.50 or up to $6 to ride public transit is like taking poor people's lunch money. I don't necessarily agree with that, but it is a reality that the people who must use it have no choice. That's why it should be a great option for all, so that all understand paying for that great service where they know they're going to be safe, not have to step in or sit in garbage to ride, and get where they need to go in 30 minutes or less with one transfer. Is that so unrealistic? Oh, wait, this is MTS. Now, a $25 fine is a full meal for people. Consequences for wrongs are great, but it's important to be reasonable and to also be consistent. If the people expecting public transit customers to pay $25 fines for a $2.50 ride have been okay with people stealing $950 from businesses that have led to violence and the trolley being used as a getaway car, then there's some psychosis going on and a lack of consistency. So that's why I have to remain against removing a forced immediate payment option. A compromise of a $6 full-day pass payment would already be much more than MTS is currently collecting and would still provide a deterrent from free riders, excluding children who are going to grow up confused on the cost of reality. Why did it even take you guys 2 years to figure out that MTS was losing millions of dollars? No different than Sandag, MTS needs to quit gaming the system. And what is proof of paid fare other than a scan? Don't the paper receipts say something about them not being accepted as a fare? And would this only apply to those who have no stored money and not to those who do and forgot to tap? That sounds like a fun change for the original item. Those citations that go to court are probably going to be thrown out anyway, in the same vein as theft currently is. The community service option should specifically be going to cleaning up graffiti and trash that affects MTS service areas. You know what would help? 2 security officers at every trolley station at all times. They could be directing people to pay and keeping the system safe and viable. There also needs to be a realistic plan to deal with the upcoming fiscal cliff from all the stupid decisions MTS has made the last 4 years.
Leslie, please unmute yourself now.
Hi, my name is Leslie Bridges, and I am from Sister Cities Project. For those of you who don't know us, our organization partners socioeconomically privileged areas in San Diego with historically underinvested communities in San Diego. And I'm here to say that I and we do not support the removal of buy on the spot option from the fare evasion diversion program. And, I do understand, just as a consumer and a resident of San Diego, the need for revenue for public transportation. I'm here in support, however, of transportation equity. And I think that this needs to be considered within the context of that. I believe that removing buy on the spot unfairly impacts under-resourced communities where there's already a long history of all kinds of banking exclusion, divestment, all of this leading back to redlining and before, that kind of drives an economy in which there is an enormous wealth gap, racial wealth gap, when compared to other communities in San Diego. And so I would just like to say that in your actions, I hope that you will not unfairly make it more difficult for this segment of transportation consumers to simply get around and do what they need to do. Thank you very much.
That concludes public comment, Chair.
Thank you, Clerk. Let's open board discussion on this item. And we will begin with Chair Pro Tem and the Chair of the Public Security Committee.
Thank you very much, Chair. Let me start by thanking Sharon and Karen and all of the staff members that have been involved over the last few months, if not a year, putting all of the data together for us. We had a lot of different iterations and a lot of back and forth, including going back to the Public Security Committee with the presentation, and we had a very robust discussion there. I would also like to let my colleagues know that in that same Public Security Committee meeting, we discussed having sort of a hybrid model of enforcement that included civil and administrative process. And so we're looking forward to discussing that in the Public Security Committee meeting, coming up with some ideas and bringing that back to the board at a later date. But these discussions were coupled at the Public Security Committee meeting, which was helpful for our discussion. The vote did come down to what you see on the screen. I will just say I've always had reservations with removal of the on-the-spot payment. I still do, and one of the things that I am wrestling with is just the fact that the Compass system is so much different from the Pronto system, in that, you know, the Compass system, you would have to buy a day pass, even if you were only taking one trip. You also had to buy a monthly pass, and those things just don't exist. Well, you don't have to do those with the Pronto system, and I just wonder how much of that also is contributing to the revenue and the numbers that we're seeing, because I don't know if there's a way to collect that and show that, but it hasn't been, that sort of distinction hasn't necessarily been made. Also want to address and thank the members of the public who called and who also are here. The one call in particular about bus drivers and their safety, I would say, I don't think I'm stepping too far out on a limb here to say that each and every member of the board really cares about our operators and our drivers, and that if there are additional ways that we can protect our drivers, we certainly need to have that discussion. I would say that we have to really hone in on having different conversations about different things, because as a matter of fact, the bus riders do not participate in fare evasion because of the way that the system is set up. And so what we're talking about here today is fare evasion. We are not talking about other very real crimes that may be committed on our line. We have to draw a line between those two things, because they often get merged, and then it goes into our policy decision making, and then we make wrong decisions based on that. So I certainly am open to having a conversation around better ways to protect our drivers at Public Security Committee. I just want to make that distinction here. I have a question for staff, and that is, so we are really trying to, I think, as a committee and as a board, make sure that people who are intentionally doing this, that we are appropriately providing some type of, I don't want to say punishment, but consequence of that, while still encouraging ridership. And for those that maybe do not understand the system or just are at a stop where the infrastructure issues are like what we heard, are not being punished because of a misunderstanding or some other thing, but not a serial person that is doing this all the time. Is there a way within our system that we can log those people that are continually doing this and have a warning system and then a revert to the citation if we see that kind of serial behavior?
Why don't we have Dan come up?
Okay. I guess just initially, I mean, I think that we can look at that and figure out how to do it. That is not information that our officers have available to them on the spot when they're citing. So when they're citing someone, we currently don't have the technology to flag this person has committed X number of violations or has 70 on the spot payments or anything like that. We do on the back end have the ability to run reports on individual Pronto card numbers and then identify how many times have they done the on the spot payment or been found without a fare. We haven't, I've run that data or I had staff run that data for me to understand kind of the scope of the problem and how often is this happening, which was one of the slides you all saw. We haven't taken that next step to say, like there was 143 cards that were in that 51 plus on the spot fares. We have not run that to see, do we know who those people are? Because we don't know every Pronto card who owns it. It's not, if you voluntarily set up a registered Pronto account, then you give your contact information and your name and you put together maybe a payment method that's associated with your card. And in those cases, we might actually know this is, Jim Jones's card. And, but if you buy a card from a retail outlet or from a ticket vending machine, it doesn't have to be registered. We have, one of the benefits of people registering it is if you lose your card or something happens, we can transfer your balance to a new one if it's registered. But so right now, I don't know of those 143 accounts, do we even know who they are? So that then we could flag it, but we could do, I guess, some analysis to see, is there a way we can do some targeted outreach, to some of the more frequent evaders and what the consequences of that could be.
Well, and I think one thing that you neglected to mention was that we do allow for an appeal. In other words, somebody could call and say, hey, I paid for this and it just didn't show up, or I couldn't find the Pronto thing. Then we could look in the back office and say, oh, this is their first time ever doing this. And then we could potentially, say, okay, next time, make sure you do it.
Yeah. And I don't know if this goes if the board approves this, then, implementation plan would be to start doing extensive outreach between now and the end of the calendar year. So we would still have the on the spot option through the end of 2024. And we are putting together, would put together marketing materials that then our officers would start kind of warning them that starting in 2025, this option wouldn't be available. You're going to need to make sure that you tap, otherwise you'll have to do the diversion program. And instead of $2.50, it'll be $25. So hopefully that will get people that prepared. And that then, we're thinking January 2nd. So after the New Year's holiday would be when we would implement. So there would be an extensive education campaign so that people aren't caught off guard by removing that option.
Okay. I would like to hear from my colleagues and what they believe. I still am concerned about the overall impact of removal of the on-the-spot payment option, especially if we have the technology to kind of pinpoint and have a targeted approach of who is truly violating this purposefully. I think that it would behoove us to invest in that because we would be taking care of the issue and the problem and still giving a little bit of grace, which makes a a better, our ridership numbers have increased. Like we are, I think, setting out to achieve what this board has been working on for a very long time. And so I'm just, doing this, I'm still a bit uneasy about it, but I would like to hear from my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Pro Tem Montgomery Steppe. Director Dillard.
Yeah, I'm having the same concerns. First of all, thank you for going over everything with us again. But if you don't mind, could you take us back to page 7? Where you have under the more than one buy on the spot, you have 58,838. Is there an opportunity, as we've kind of sort of been discussing, to maybe not fully take out the diversion program, but instead focus on the people that are actually being caught on the spot and haven't paid? If there is a way that we could have our security officers know if there's been more than one, and then that we have some kind of charge. I know that you mentioned that there is and I'm not sure if those, if the data that you were giving or you were just throwing out a number. You said if they get caught, they're charged the $2.50, which is the one way. But then the 19 times they're, not getting caught at all. And somehow that's how you came up with the dollar amount there that we've lost through the year. If you compute, are you using the 58,000 people to show that number, the loss?
Could we have finance come up and discuss how you calculate that lost number? Thank you. The Deputy CFO, Mike Thompson.
So Mike Thompson helped us validate what those are, but it's not as simple as just the 58,000, but it is all the Pronto data. So we took at how many what's the evasion rate, how many on the spot payments have they been, how does that compare? And there's 2 different methods. I don't know if I'm not the most articulate.
Multiple different ways of the way we've looked at that. We've looked at the way in the slide previous to this goes a couple of ways we've looked at it. But just in talking in general terms, on the trolley, we average about 3.4 million riders every month. Only about 1 million tap every month or buy a one-way pass. So there's 2.4 million riders every month that are not tapping. Statistically, half of them are stored value riders. So that's over 1 million people a month that are not tapping. We have 50,000 that we've identified that are repeat users, but we're only sampling 3 to 5% every month. We're not sampling that whole 2.4 million. So, we've calculated a number of different ways. We're looking at different statistics, but it all comes to be to the $10 to $15 million range, what we're losing on an annual basis.
And if you look back at pre-Pronto diversion, in calendar year 2019, we had 38 million riders on trolley, and we collected $43 million. In calendar year 2023, we finally got back up to 38.4 million riders on trolley, but we only collected $28.1 million. So $15 million less in 2023 than we had collected in 2019 for the same number of riders.
And that was after the transfer policy where the board approved that transfers would be free.
Yeah.
I think what I'm getting at is that in the public safety meetings, we have talked about the culture and changing that culture. And what I'm thinking is maybe another way around this is to focus on the people that, number one, have been caught not paying their fee, and maybe doubling that fee. In other words, instead of them and charging them $2.50, we charge them $5 for both ways, whether they do it or not, whether they come back or they just have a one-way trip, but they're penalized because they got caught not paying. And then number two, for the more than one fare evasion, that we have a more significant penalty that, in a way, they can still call in or have a way to get out of it. Maybe there's something that we could do about that if. For instance, the one person that got up and stated that they're not going to cross the railroad tracks to tap and then go back to the other side because it's not convenient for them to do that. But we have to find a way to, and we've talked about this in the public safety meeting about, starting to do warnings to people to let them know how serious it is if they do evade paying, that those penalties are going to be significant and they will be held accountable if they're caught. And I'm just wondering if, instead of eliminating the fare evasion program, instead to focus on the people that actually get caught, so that we could change the culture of what's happening, because it has increased significantly that people are able to game the system by just waiting until they get caught. So I'm just throwing that out there. I know it's kind of mixed into the public safety issue or what we've discussed in public safety, but I'm wondering if we should totally eliminate it and start focusing on the people that we actually catch.
So to speak to Board Member Dillard's comments, the diversion program isn't going away. This is actually making it permanent. And so we will still have the option for somebody to divert for 120 days. They can do public service, or they pay the $25 fine. Oh, here we go. Here's the slide. So we are still continuing this. Then there's also the ability to appeal, and they can, call in and say, hey, I didn't know I had to tap, and we can be lenient upon that, especially if we look in the back office and find that they've never been, caught doing this before. So it's not that we're getting rid of the diversion program. And then the Public Security Committee, 5 of the 6 members were there, and they all discussed this idea of paying on the spot a $5 fee, but it was not approved, and said the recommendation is what we're showing you here today.
And I guess just the one thing that I would add to it, so this is the program, just what's in red would no longer be part of the program. Everything else would still be there. And with the ability to pay online and pay by phone, we don't have the technology for an operator to know, hey, if this is your first, you get one buy on the spot, and then after that, you don't get another one. And so right now, the way that the rules are, there's no limit. So even though on that other slide it showed, that there's, 156, I think, cards that have more than 51 buy on the spot, that's allowed under our system right now. Like the current program allows it. So, so we wouldn't be able to do that. We would if you remove the on the spot and then you go into the diversion program, our intent would be to let people, again, learning curve for the next 2.5 months, and then it would be implemented. But we could look at if there's, when they are in the diversion program themselves, is there a first offense or second offense? But we only know that after the fact in the back end. We don't know that when we're in the encounter. So there's no way to be like, oh, I won't give you a citation this time, but next time you'll get a citation, because the officer will never have that information available to them. And that would be a complete technology change. So to do that, I think, the procurement, the scoping of that would be at least a year before we could implement something like that, if that's what the board wanted to do.
Well, I guess where I'm having trouble is that we didn't really have the numbers, like we had the percentage of, people that were being caught, but I don't know. I'm rethinking all of this, thinking that maybe we should focus more on the people who get caught. And, I don't know. I don't know about the $2.50 because I'm just thinking that people are not really paying attention that they have to pay, and we need to have. I don't even know if I agree with the 120 days because I'm thinking that maybe it should be a shorter period of time. I think, I don't know. I'm just having reservations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Director Dillard. Director Elo Rivera.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for all the work on this. Appreciate the questions and comments from Supervisor Montgomery Stepp and Councilmember Dillard. I think that one thing that that Supervisor Montgomery Stepp said that I really want to make sure I reiterate is the importance of making sure that our drivers and operators are safe, and wanting to make sure that we focus very narrowly on the fare enforcement piece here so that we give that other issue the attention it deserves, and don't misalign solutions to, real issues. It's just really important that gets the specific attention that it deserves, as does this. One of my I recognize the need to make sure that we are having riders pay, that there's no disagreement there until we shift to a system that is funded in such a way that allows folks to ride without paying because we figured out a different revenue stream, then we need to get folks to pay. At the same time, I have concerns that this is not going to solve for the problem in the way that we want it to solve for the problem. And I'm just going to kind of talk through where I see this going, which is us putting this in place and then saying that we need more security to enforce this. And we're going to need to hire more security to do this. And there's an ongoing cost associated with that. And I think we're going to be chasing tens of millions of dollars, $2.50 at a time. And I don't think we're ever going to get there with that equation. That does not mean that that this doesn't warrant real consideration. And I'm very curious to hear what other members of the board have to say. But if what we are trying to do is ensure that everyone who's supposed to pay pays, there are other more effective ways to do that in terms of the design of our system. And I know that there's significant one-time costs associated with that, but the ongoing costs associated with shifting from a very, very open system that we have now to a more closed one, those costs are far more predictable, and the outcome would be far more predictable as well. Not to mention the enhancements that it would have for the overall safety and aesthetics of our system. And so, we think about the opportunity to create each of our to really create a beautiful and safe transit system that at the same time ensures that the folks who are supposed to pay. I believe that would enhance our advertising opportunities as well, as a more closed system would create more opportunities for us to provide advertising opportunities. And I am curious, it would seem that you could use a bond to help pay for that sort of those sort of enhancements as well, since there would be a pretty easy to expect revenue source via fares to cover the costs of the enhancements that are made. Am I wrong in thinking that we could?
Well, we could explore that. That's not right today.
I understand. I just, in weighing our options, I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
Is there anything that we know of that would prevent us from using something like that?
To close up our system. There are certain locations that it would be really tight to try to put gates and barriers around the actual stations. So that's the challenge. We'd have to really design everything to work with the landscape because we run in the city street, for instance, on C Street, and how do you block off the end of Fifth Avenue? You know, like there's just things that we would have to come through with. But to your point of you're skeptical of whether this will work, we could put it in place, you know, with the 2.5 months of educational campaign, then see how it works out in 3 months and come back to the board or the committee to talk about what has been the experience. And that would be a way to fact check what staff is recommending to you, what the Public Security Committee recommended to you is valid, that result will be that we will get more revenue from fares.
I'm not questioning that we will get more. I'm questioning that we're going to get nearly as much as we're hoping that we're going to get. We will get more. I have zero doubt about that. I don't think we're going to close that gap. And that doesn't mean that it's not worth taking measures to close the gap in some way. I think one of the most, if not the most consistent thing that I've said since I've been on this board is the need to increase revenue. So I'm not going to be inconsistent in that. What I am, my concern more lies in, there will be the low-hanging fruit of the folks there will be some folks who stop not tapping because I don't think that that's going to close the gap in a significant way whatsoever. The severity of the punishment is far less of a deterrent than the expectation of being caught. And the only way that we increase the expectation of being caught is through significant increases in the number of people who are checking to see who paid, or by closing the system up. So again, my concern is less with the low-hanging fruit of folks who, okay, I'm fine, not going to risk it, and more with what remains and what it will cost us to chase the remainder. And so it's just really in the vein of wanting to be eyes wide open, of really solve for the problem that we are attempting to solve for here, and doing that in a way that is sustainable and enhances the overall experience of riding, rather than detracts from it. So again, very interested to hear what else others have to say. I'm not opposed to this in theory. I think what I have bigger concerns about is the way that it looks in practice. And again, I agree that people who ride should pay, unless we've provided them a reason not to pay. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Ela Rivera. Director Rodriguez.
I think that was my bad. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the work and discussion on this item. It is very important, and we did have a robust discussion in the Public Safety Committee meeting. Thank you. I do have some questions. So this Pronto system, when was the infrastructure built out?
It was fully implemented in October of 2021.
And the reason I ask is because there does seem to be a correlation between how easy it is for riders to get on the system without actually paying. And I did notice the very small percentage of individuals that have evasion on the buses, right? Because you literally have to walk through in order to get in. So I think sharing some of my colleagues' sentiment, I mean, anybody gets on public transit should pay a fare, right? That's the deal. And at the same time, I think we have a system that makes it easy for evasion to take place. So the issue that I have is how quickly we are drawn to a formal, very punitive approach that as I agree, is kind of never ending if we continue going down this route. And we have been there before without actually addressing the infrastructure needs in order to make it easier for folks to pay. And so I would like to have that analysis come forth and have that plan laid out. And at the same time, want to challenge all of us to look for additional funding sources to make sure that mass transit is publicly funded and that everybody has a chance to ride at a very accessible rate. I say this often, we pay taxes to pay for roads that I've never driven on, right? We all do. And I think that sometimes public transit is not seen the same way, but it is an investment for our future. And so I would like to challenge all of us to do that. But I would also like to have a study conducted so that we can address those infrastructure faults that we may have at the moment.
So if somebody is given the opportunity to tap on the spot, that means they have money on their card. So they are already aware that they have to pay the fare to get on. So those are the ones that we're trying to get to go through and actually acquiesce. Yes, I will pay a fare every time I ride. I rode the trolley 10 times this week. I didn't get checked once. For me, that would have been, of course, I'm an employee and I'm free, but if it was $250 each way and I didn't get checked, you might calculate out that I'm going to accept a citation and then I'm going to pay the $25 because this is how it's going to work. I would never come to this board and say, we need more fare enforcement, so let's pay for more security. And the committee is very clear that they do not want that, the Public Security Committee. So we want to continue our very compassionate approach to this. But this will give people the opportunity to comply, but also have a fairly moderate fine to understand that within 120 days, we need to do this. But also, it provides them the opportunity to do 3 hours of community service instead, which will help address those who are struggling to pay the fare.
So I appreciate that. And I actually do agree with overwhelmingly what you mentioned, but it did not mention the fact that we do have some shortfalls when it comes to our infrastructure in order to have people pay and make it as easy as possible to pay. And so that's what I'm asking for. I think it's important so that we could do an analysis of if there is evasion, where does the evasion take place? Are there specific sites? Are there specific locations? Do we have any infrastructure needs in those locations that we've addressed? Have we looked into them? So that's what I'm looking for, right? And so at some point, hopefully in the foreseeable future, we could have something like that brought to either public safety or to the board directly.
Yeah, I think, and certainly through some of our capital programs, we have since this issue first started, and that was something that came up of the not enough validators. And I don't have the stats in front of me. I'm sorry, I didn't anticipate these questions today about how many new validators we've added, but we have definitely increased the validators at each stations. I think that every time we go into a new project at a station, that's something that we're looking at as we get grants and other things too, of can we add a validator? It is not a simple proposition because you have to have a fiber line that goes to those validators so that they're connected to the system. So it's not as easy as just, bolting something down. So it requires kind of trenching and bringing that. But I know that that's something that our capital team looks at every time we are going into a new station is can we add more validators? We got a grant for our TOD project at Grantville. And one of the things that they used some of those funds for was to add more validators at the station so that there's more locations. So that certainly is an ongoing initiative. Just a couple things I just want to make sure that the board has in mind as they're going through and, maybe crafting policy direction that they want to give to us on this issue. I don't have the stats today, but for closed, barrier systems that we've talked about, they still have fairly high fare evasion, on certain things. So that in and itself doesn't, you actually probably would have to still have people at each of those stations because it's if you have a person there, otherwise you get people jumping fare gates and things like that. So I don't have the statistics. We can bring you all back, you know, a report and analysis on what it would look like, you know, and to change from a barrier-free to non-barrier. The way the program is currently structured, so if we took no action today and left it, you're within our rules if you don't buy a fare until you're inspected. So there is no rule that says that what people are doing right now is wrong, you know, it's built in that that's okay. And I can say that I have always been impressed with the San Diego community of how rule follows we are. So before we had this new Pronto system and this, you know, that you can purchase a fare or not, we traditionally had a 3% or lower fare evasion rate on trolley and on bus. And so it's only with the advent of Pronto, and then also with this, I think they all kind of combine together, the Pronto system of how you buy your fare. Instead of buying your monthly pass at the beginning of the month to get those discounts, you can earn it as you tap. And so there are all those changes that are more important. But in general, before, you had to have a pass, and you would get a ticket if you didn't have either a one-way ticket or a day pass or a monthly pass. And by and large, the San Diego community were very honorable, and, you know, because it was an honor system, really, because we weren't checking any more than we do now. You know, we still had 3 to 5% inspection rate, but people bought their fare. So maybe I'm being naive and a little bit too optimistic. And I know that there's a certain amount of how do you, you know, pull back, but even in our barrier-free system before, when people knew that they were supposed to either have a one-way ticket or a day pass or a monthly pass, they did. So but right now that's perfectly okay and valid and part of our rule system if they don't have one and if they only pay when they're inspected.
I hear you. And I think that goes to the point of maybe the infrastructure was in place before that encouraged people to actually buy a ticket, and now made it so much more easier to just get on and get off. And so I think by us going down only this approach and not realizing that the infrastructure has some shortfalls, I think we might not, this might not be as successful as we would hope. I think both have to be hand in hand.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Director Rodriguez. Let's go to Vice Chair Goebel.
Thank you, Chair. Excellent work for the Public Safety Committee. Thank you for taking the time to have the discussion. Thanks for the presentation and the stats. One of the things that I would be interested to learn from staff is, where are these pedestals being placed? Are they in the same spots where the compass pedestals were, or are they moved to a place that's resulting in less tapping because we thought it would be a better place to put a pedestal, but...
No. So we did a full analysis when we did Pronto to put them where we know that people would be able to see. So for instance, if you go downstairs, you'll see there's, I'm looking around for Israel, but there's like 15 validators all lined up around this building for people to tap. That was not something we had with Compass, because it was not required for you to tap on Compass because you bought a monthly pass or you bought a fare product. So we did that analysis, and then we added even more based on the board's concerns about not enough validators. And then on top of that, the ticket vending machines themselves serve as the validator. So we have a lot of different options for people now that we did not have for Compass.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Where the fare evasions are happening, one of the obstacles there is if somebody gets on in El Cajon with no fare or doesn't tap, but gets checked in Lemon Grove, that would count as a fare evasion in Lemon Grove. That would be unfair to Lemon Grove when the person actually got on in El Cajon. So we got to be careful when we say, where is the fare evasion happening? Because they could be checked in an area that is unfairly getting monitored versus where it started. So we have to think about that. We do want to change the culture. The culture is costing us $11 to $14 million a year, according to slide 6. And that means what we're trying to do is change the behavior. Right now, the behavior is an odds game, and they know it. They know I'm checked 8 to 10% of the time, And the penalty for those other 9 free trips is $2.50. It's a mathematical lose-lose proposition. So I think when we say, well, now you're only going to be checked 1 in 10 times, but that penalty is $25, that's a different mathematical situation there. And even with the $25, you can get out of the $25 if you appeal or do community service or other situations. So I think the Public Safety Committee got this one right, and I would support their efforts.
Thank you, Vice Chair Goebel. Let's go back to Chair Pro Tem Montgomery Stepp.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so the January date, if we were to move forward with the recommendation as an entire board, let me just tell you where I'm coming from. I still would like to see how we can be able to give our security officers access to information around who is continually practicing fare evasion on the spot. I would still like to see that, because I think that would, for those 95,000 times someone didn't tap that one time, what we're proposing now is that we would be providing a citation to them for $25. And those are the one-time folks, right? That's what this would do. And so that is still concerning to me. I would like to see how we can operationalize the finding information out about people on the spot, about their fare evasion practices on the spot, not their social security number or anything like that. Karen, I think I heard you say it might take up to a year for you all to do that. Seems like this data collection and all the work that you have been doing, kind of you're sort of halfway there, because you already asked, how many times people have done this 50 plus 1 times, right? And you were able to pull down that data.
Absolutely. I mean, I think in just understanding so it's a totally different software than what we have for our officers when they're writing the citation and doing the inspection to know. Potentially, if kind of one of the concerns is giving people that kind of one chance, if you take the action today, but then on the back end, when we get the citation, we would be able to look up and see, is this that person's first violation? And then you could take action to say the first violation is $5 or, some smaller amount, and then they get one chance, because at that point too, we know who the person is because we've written a citation. And so you can connect it with a person. To the extent, I think we have the technology to be able to do that going forward. It's the year would be, and we can look into bringing back to the Public Security Committee, we can try to go find out what technology is out there and what the cost would be to upgrade what our officers have. But that's where, for us to scope it and do a competitive procurement and purchase it, that's why I said a year for something like that.
I would like to see that in the meantime, while we're talking about other ways to secure the system through our infrastructure and everything. I would like to see what could be on hand for us in the shorter term, because you have said it, and I agree several times, there is no rule against what people are doing right now. What we're trying to do is create a rule that I feel might be more fair and get to the targeted folks that we're looking at. Because this is, at the end of the day, there are the financial implication, but there's also the philosophical part of this. And that is creating a culture where people are doing this over and over again. So then why will we target people that do it once and never do it again? Right? Especially as our ridership increases. So I'm just trying to look at all those things. And also I do think we're going into November and December. I don't know what the ridership patterns are there. I don't know if they go up or down. But January at the beginning of the year is coming sooner than I think we think it is. And so I would ask that if we are going to move this route, that we put that back until end of February or March. That would be my ask. Go ahead, Sharon.
What I was going to suggest is we could put in place administratively where if people appealed because if the citation was their first citation under the diversion program, we could put in place that they could appeal, and that if we looked in and found that this was their first time, we could then waive the citation and tell them next time you're going to be in the system, and so you will have to pay the citation.
Because we could look at how many times has that Pronto card done a buy on the spot. So that way, again, I guess you're not giving like free amnesty to people who all along have been multiple times buying on the spot. If you give them enough education to say the buy on the spot option, doesn't count as buying your fare anymore. And so if you give them 2 months, 3 months, 4 months of warning on that, then, for people truly, we show that there isn't a history that they have done the buy on the spot option, then that could be a basis to waive the first violation.
Okay.
Would that get closer to?
Closer. I will get closer. I'll go ahead and move the recommendation with that, but also just when we're looking at the numbers, I'm just saying that those 92 or 95,000, we are right now receiving their fare at least. If we cite them, we're probably going to receive less from them than we are right now, because people are not. This is what begins the cycle, which is what got us here in the first place. We were trying to break that cycle of folks having what could turn out to be a criminal citation. And the on the spot has always served as, we're at least getting this funding without having to pay for additional security, because I do think that's what it's going to come down to if that's our overall goal. But now the education has to include that there's a proactive measure that people do have to call in order to be eligible for this waiver. It's just such a rock and a hard place, but I'll go ahead and move that as a sort of an addendum to the on-the-spot payment option, and then the rest of the recommendation.
Chair Pro Tem, just so that I capture your motion accurately, it is the Public Security Committee recommendation, and then is it just the Public Security recommendation, or was there any other element to it?
Sorry, I turned my button off. Thank you. This, I guess we are removing that on the spot payment, but we're providing a waiver for first-time violators.
Yes.
That's what this is. And the education should include that, because this is what may not make it successful. It's still a proactive measure by the writer, because unless we say that when we are providing the citation, I'm not.
We could actually put that on what we provide for them. When we hand them the citation and we could put the information that if you appeal this and it's determined this is your first time violating the fare, we will waive that. So if that's the addendum to the recommendation.
Yes, that is.
I just want to make sure that, so when we go back and look at it, is it they get a waiver if their card has never before done an on-the-spot payment, or
it would be
from
after
kind
this
of proactive date?
No, it would be after this goes into effect.
Okay.
So if they do violate it, and there's the problem. If we're giving citations every time.
I mean, I think that we could say if you have if you have one on-the-spot payment between the board's action date, or I guess maybe November 1st, because that's probably when we'll start our outreach campaign, because it'll take us a couple weeks to get the materials together. But so if somebody because since right now under the rules, they didn't violate anything by making an on-the-spot payment. So if they had an on-the-spot payment from November 1st on, then they wouldn't be eligible to like have their citation waived. But if they haven't had an on-the-spot payment from November 1st on, then if they get a citation after we implement it, and we maybe February 1st, or would you want for February 1st, then if they had an on-the-spot payment basically between November 1st and February 1st, then they wouldn't be eligible to get the citation waived because they had been warned at that time. They might have done it that one time, but they know at that point that they're supposed to be tapping going forward. Is that? I just want to make sure that we implement what you were anticipated and that we're not.
Or you could say it's only one waiver.
Yeah.
You get one waiver, and then if you've ever had another citation, you have to go through the diversion program.
Right, because people right now are not getting the citations, correct?
Some people are getting citations, but
some people just don't. Yeah. I mean, it's the people that are willing to pay the on the spot don't get a citation. So
yeah.
Let me read what I have right now, and you can edit this to capture your intent. I have adopt the Public Security Committee recommendation effective February 1st, 2025, and that upon implementation, there will be language added to citations that the rider may request a waiver of the penalty for a first violation.
Yes, that seems a little more simple than what we've been discussing, but yes, that is the intent.
Yeah, and I think that's something operable that we could work with. We'll have to figure out who is going to answer the phone for that. But I think that's something that we could work with.
Okay, and just the bottom, the folks at the bottom of the chart, with the 143, so with 156, 51 plus, we already know, as we've discussed, some of those folks may be dealing with other issues, right?
100%.
So just to have that in mind as well as part of our diversion approach.
Yes,
absolutely.
Okay.
Well, and at this point, none of these people, however many times in the past they've done an on-the-spot purchase, won't be held against them because that won't go into that analysis. Because again, technically, even those 156, they were following the rules. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair Pro Tem Montgomery Stepp. Let's go to Director Elo Rivera.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure if the second was recognized.
Not yet.
If not, then I'm happy to second. And I would ask Supervisor if you'd be amenable to, in addition to the motion that was made, request a very preliminary analysis for the board of the fare evasion rates of closed systems versus open. My understanding is that closed systems typically run in the 1 to 2 range, with some at 5.
And this is a source of discussion at every conference I go to because there's a lot of closed systems that are getting beat more than we are. Even in the MTA in New York, their bus system has a worse fare evasion rate, even though they have drivers than ours. So we could bring that back as a report to you so you can see what others are experiencing as well.
I think that'd be valuable to see. Again, just going off something that I just heard. I know that the DC system just made a substantial investment in closing the system. Seattle's made some investments in security, but with the additional roles attached to that, there's substantial cost to that investment that they've made. So that's the second. The last thing I would say, Sharon, I think that what you said is interesting about the shift in the way that our riders are paying or not paying. I don't think that's just because San Diegans have lost their morality. Right. I don't think you're suggesting that either.
Yeah.
I think that the cost of living is crushing people, and if they can figure out a way to keep that $200.50 on their card or in their account for one more ride, then they're trying to do that. And it's not just here where they're trying to save $250 at a time. I've been talking to some restaurant owners who are noticing declining tips for folks. People are being squeezed, and they're trying to squeeze what they can back into their pocket, but in whatever ways that they can find. And that doesn't mean that we should be, bearing that cost, but I think we should be real and honest about, kind of why that is, and make sure that we're trying to solve for the problem that we're trying to solve for in the most targeted way possible. So thank you for Chair for letting the discussion be as robust as it was. Thank you, Sharon and Karen, for the responses, and thanks to my colleagues for all your comments as well.
Thank you, Director Ela Rivera. Chair Pro Tem Montgomery Stepp, were you good with one addition there? Okay, so let me just read the motion as I have it. We'll confirm that that is the intent of the maker and the seconder, and then we'll move to a vote. The motion as I have it is that the board adopt the Public Security Committee recommendation effective February 1st, 2025, and that upon implementation, MTS add to the citation language that the rider may request a waiver of the penalty for a first violation, and that staff bring to the board a preliminary analysis of closed versus open system fare evasion rates. Does that capture what we discussed? Okay, clerk, please call the vote.
The motion passes with 13 members voting yes and 2 members absent.
Thank you, clerk. And I want to thank the board for the robust consideration and discussion of that item. All right, let's go ahead and move on to item number 26, which is fiscal year 2024 annual performance monitoring and operating reports. And we're going to turn this over to Dennis Desmond, Mike Wygant, and Brian Riley to provide these reports. Feel free to begin when you're ready.
Good morning. Thank you, board. On my left this morning, I have Brian Riley, Chief Operating Officer of Rail, Mike Wygant, Chief Operating Officer of Bus, and on my right is Matt Grace, our new data analyst in the planning department. And my part of this is the performance monitoring report for fiscal year 2024, and Matt is the brains behind this report, so we're happy to answer any questions afterwards. MTS Board Policy 42 has 20 different metrics that we evaluate our service on an annual basis. All of these metrics and the performance are included in attachment A of the board agenda item. This is our FY24 annual performance monitoring report. I made a couple of formatting changes to the report this year, and that is that I added some of the data from FY18 and FY19 so we could have a comparison between pre-pandemic and then current numbers as well. For this presentation, I like to highlight a couple of these metrics that are of special importance and interest to the board. And the first, of course, is ridership. I'm going to ask for Dahlia's assistance in moving the. Thank you, Dahlia. The first is, again, ridership. We had a nice 10% increase in ridership from FY23 to FY24. We had almost 76 million riders last year, and that really indicates that we are continuing to improve from the pandemic. We don't think that we've reached a normal rate yet. We think that we're still improving from the pandemic. Again, we're at 57 million in FY22, going up to 69 million in FY23 and back up to 75.7 million. So we're at 86 million in FY19 before the pandemic. So we are slowly getting there. And I'm happy to report that we are actually about 8% up in FY25 so far. Our average weekday ridership was at 240,000 for FY24, so that was an 11% increase over FY23, and we've seen a lot of days with over 250,000 riders. And you can see on this chart here, this is 5 years. So there's a lot going on this chart, but 2024 is the blue line. And as you can see it moving across the top of the screen, we actually reached 2 weeks ago during Free Ride Day. That week we reached an average weekday ridership of 282,000. So that is a post-pandemic record. And a reminder that our lowest point was the week of April 6th, 2020, when we were at 74,000. So it's taken us 4 years, but we've gone from 74,000 back up to 282,000, working our way back up to that 300,000 a day that we were at pre-pandemic. One of our most important performance metrics is the passengers per revenue hour. So our Policy 42 goal is to improve this each year for each route category. And most of the major categories did show an increase year over year. The differences are Express and Rapid. Express because we eliminated the Route 950 Express and replaced it with the 227 Rapid. And with all of that extra service that we put in with 227 Rapid, it's going to take 12 to 18 months to absorb that new ridership and for these to come back up. But overall, we saw a 3.2% increase from year to year for the entire system. And so we're working our way back up towards that 37 passengers per revenue hour that we had system-wide in FY19 pre-pandemic. I wanted to put a couple of financial metrics up on here with all the discussion of the SB 125 funds and how we spend those in the upcoming fiscal cliff. I thought it would be informative to have fare box recovery and subsidy per passenger. Fare box recovery is the amount of our costs that are covered by fares that are paid by our customers. So pre-pandemic, we were at about 34% fare box recovery. Last year, we were at 19.6. There's actually a Transportation Development Act TDA requirement that we have 20% overall and 31.9% system-wide for fixed route. So those requirements have been suspended by the legislature through 2026. So we aren't currently required to meet those. But as you can see, we're a little bit away from meeting those. We're at about 22% on our fixed route and again below 20% system-wide. So that did decrease a little bit from FY23 to FY24 as a result of increasing costs and the revenue as was discussed in the earlier items. So again, at about 19.6. The subsidy per passenger adds in passenger numbers here. So this is a little bit more optimistic system-wide. Pre-pandemic in FY19, we're at $2.07. We're over double that in FY22. That has slowly come down. We're at $3.93 in FY24. And the reason for that coming down is that the passenger levels have gone up. So again, the cost and the fares are reflected in the fare box recovery. And so that's down a little bit, but the subsidy per passenger in a good way is down a little bit because those passenger numbers have gone up. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike Wygant, and Mike is going to discuss the year in review for the bus operations.
Good morning again. Thank you, Dennis. So the team has prepared a few items for you to consider or to look at as far as some of the highlights for the year for bus operations. Safety to our customers and our employees are always our top priority. One of those components is our annual CHP or terminal inspections. The California Highway Patrol comes into each of our divisions, spends basically almost a week looking at everything from the vehicles, inspecting a certain percent, 10 to 20% of the vehicles. They look at our pull notice program, all of our licensing, all of our training, our drug and alcohol training for our employees. I'm happy to report that we had no out-of-service vehicles or any violations as it relates to our training or maintenance records, anything. We have over 4,700 blades or bus stop signs in the system. We went through and either replaced or modified all of them to put some of our newest policies and procedures with them. Safety, continuing on the safety, not that there weren't challenges with combustion vehicles or CNG vehicles, but battery electric and maybe one day hydrogen vehicles have some very unique challenges. So that's been a big focus for several years through our transition. We spend a lot of time with familiarity and training with our local responders, our fire department, our emergency services. We do drills. We actually prepare. The best way to prevent is to prepare and to train. We haven't had any, and we're hoping we don't, but we're prepared if we have one. So we do drills in each division. We've purchased some additional equipment to help for the potential of one. We call them a thermal event in the industry. We had high voltage vehicles before we had battery electric vehicles. Our hybrid vehicles for many years had high voltage on them, but it was a very small sub-fleet of our system. With the transition to zero emission, all the new vehicles will have that. So we have to expand that training program to a much larger group of employees. Some of the highlights with safety, it has its accident rates, has its ups and downs based on traffic. While we were in COVID, in the real height of COVID, there was very few passengers, there was very little traffic. Accident rates actually became exceptional, but that's to be expected. But still, from 2014, we've managed more than a 24% reduction in our preventable accident rate. So that's a really good number. This is probably new to most of you, but what you see in this picture are what is called electronic mirrors. They're cameras, basically, that will drive the image that you see in historically, which would have been a mirror reflection. The Department of Transportation in California has most recently approved this. If you spend any time in Europe, you'll see more and more vehicles with this, but eventually, all of our new cars probably won't have exterior mirrors for a few different reasons. One, it's one more obstruction for you to hit, knock off, brake. They're easier to maintain while they stay out of the weather. They actually provide a better angle. They can adjust in light. They can adjust in rain and other weather. So we'll probably see this trend. We just right now, as you can see in the right picture, we'll have both for the drivers as we're kind of testing and vetting the best application. But this is something you'll probably see to your own light duty vehicle eventually. We spend a lot of time developing a new worker assault risk reduction program. So we have goals and objectives, and we identify and meet every month to see what we can do to improve that and to provide a safer environment for all of our employees. Some other things we've talked about many times, operators, attracting and retaining operators is a challenge. One of the things we had historically a 6-week interval. So every 6 weeks we bring in a new operator class. We found that one of the challenges we were having is we would make them an offer, and after 5 or 6 weeks, we would start their training, we'd lose them. So we've found creative ways to reduce that training down to a 3-week gap. So we start a new class every 3 weeks. We developed a new customer service playbook. We're pretty proud of that. We have our annual VTT, or Verification of Transit Training program for all of our operators. So every operator comes in every year, gets 8 hours of refresher or new training, but we added this particular component. It's really focused in on giving them new skill sets to improve customer service, not just for our metrics of less complaints, which obviously we would like to see, but it's really putting the nexus of customer service, how it relates to their safety and how it relates to their health and well-being. Going home a happy operator is a good operator. And so that's a new program. We also went through and got one of our employees, Andrew in the bottom right here, through the FAA, certified to fly drones throughout the city in the approved areas. And we use that for training videos. What you see in the picture in the middle is actually an on-ramp on the 8 freeway in the Hotel Circle area, and it gives a bird's eye view. It's not yellow. We did that for the purpose of the picture, but we use this as a training aid for the operators to understand this is a hotspot location. Gives them kind of a different view of how to set up so that they can make this radius turn, because if they don't set up correctly, the left front of their vehicle actually protrude out onto the 8 freeway at speed as they're trying to merge, because there's a turning radius limitation to the bus. So that's just one example of what we've been doing with the drones. We've used it for many training videos already. We've implemented a few different things for the operators for morale and well-being and for wages, things like split differential pay. We put that in place this year. We've added compensation for behind the wheel training. So every operator can go through a training program and be eligible to be an en-route operator trainer. So they can train their peers. So we've made some improvements there, added some additional time off for first year employees also. Amenities is always a big part of our work throughout the year. What you'll see on the right is some work that was done at Fashion Valley, a before and after on the right, so some modernization and some cleanup. And Fashion Valley is always a kind of a trouble spot because it tends to flood every year, so it always needs a lot of annual work. On the left, you'll see some new, I won't call them brick and mortar because they're module units that we delivered to that and set up and painted in our colors, but they replace porta potties basically at the Euclid and the Palomar station. So a much better application for the operators. So that may be a model for other facilities in the future where we don't have brick and mortar. We also did a lot of work with the 227 at the Iris, both the east and the west side of that. Some more projects for the employees. Bathroom, we went through and did a refurbishment of restrooms at IED and our KMD divisions for operators and for maintenance staff. In the bottom left, you see a pretty big project where we were removing all the underground storage tanks at the Imperial Avenue division. So back when we had diesel vehicles or unleaded tanks, lubricants, all that's been removed out of the ground for a couple of reasons. Obviously, it presents we don't have the need for some of it now. We don't use any diesel at that facility or any facility, but it's also preparing us for the next transition of zero emission. We wanted to remove those products from the ground before we start to build overhead charging phase one at that division. Employee morale. So we're going to do something new, and we're going to invite everyone February 1st, mark it on your calendar early. We're going to bring back what we call the bus rodeo. So the industry for many, many years, and I don't think MTS has done it since 2006, does their own at-agency competition, builds an obstacle course for operators to come in and show off their skills. When they win, they can go on to a regional rodeo and then to the national rodeo in Austin. We're also going to have a maintenance team that would represent MTS, but we'll have lots of activities and food and things for kids to do, and we're really excited to get that going again. We're also building a gym, a small gym at our Imperial Avenue division for employees. We had our annual CHP party recently where we recognize all the great work that the maintenance team does, and our years of service recognition program that we do here in this room as all hands meetings or individually out to the people in the field. Talked about ZEB transition. We currently have 25 battery electric buses in service right now. The graph shows you kind of over the years of the transition how the mileage continues to increase as the fleet rises. And we have to get the infrastructure in place, obviously, to support that. We reported back in June that we surpassed the 1 million miles on our zero emission fleet. That continues to grow. We also have 13 more battery electric buses coming early next year. Speaking of that transition, we completed the master plan for our KMD, our Kearney Mesa division. CTAC, we've talked about in many meetings about how that's developing. We have 3 of the 5 parcels already acquired. We're already, have our weekly meetings on the design and the development and the layout of what that property will look like. And putting in some of the board's direction and staff's recommendations on what a brand new facility would look like. What you see in the 2 renderings here is actually what will start in March it's phase 1 of overhead charging infrastructure at our Imperial Avenue division down the street. So if you've seen our South Bay project where we have 24 overhead chargers, Imperial Avenue, it's probably a year-long project, but by, I would say, March of 2026, would have charging for 30 vehicles on the north side of the lot. So that just kind of gives you a layout of what that will look like. Some more fleet highlights. We continue to maintain a very high mean distance between failure rate. We did deliver 29 buses, full-size heavy-duty buses to the system this year, and we also took a delivery of 24 cutaways that are used for our minibus service and paratransit service. We're in the process of getting them ready for service right now. Speaking of access service, that was the ridership that during COVID, system-wide, we saw significant reductions, obviously, in our ridership, but our access service had a reduction of more than 90% at its low. And that continues to increase. It was as more centers open up or people become more comfortable with the environment, our ridership is returning. We have seen recently in the last year a pretty significant increase. We were seeing 5 to 10% annually, but we jumped 26% last year. So that's a huge increase. So it's good to see those customers coming back. Our on-time performance and our onboard time performance continues to improve. We booked more than 400,000 reservations last year. We also, you may remember, transitioned the Sorrento Valley Coaster connection to North County Transit District. We gave them, through a procurement process or a trade, some vehicles to operate that, and they've rebranded them, and that's working pretty successfully. We also conducted an APTA, American Public Transit Association, peer review last year. It started, I believe, in early February, to really bring in peers from the industry to look at our access service and see what trends we're not implementing or what we should do. We got a really good report from them. We were complying with all the laws, but they did give us lots of good ideas on how we could be better, how we could support and serve our customers better. And so we've already developed a plan and a timeline to start implementing. Several of those things have already been put in place. So we're excited about that. Our support services, so the 8th floor in this building and also the transit store as you walk by, it's a very large part of our organization. These picture on the right is our PSR group and their supervisor. There's more than 40 of them. If you've been out on the rail or the bus system, you'll see the people in the red jackets. I have family and friends. I said, if you need any help, just go look for somebody in a red jacket. Even in the heat of the summer, sometimes I see them in their jackets, but they got a red shirt underneath them. But they're really great as far as all of our, not only just regular riders, but special events. We had more than 250 special events that they supported this year. Within the call systems, we had more than 300,000 phone calls with less than a 1-minute wait time and a 4% abandonment. So that's pretty exceptional by them. We had nearly 11,000 customer feedbacks about our service and the quality. Some of them obviously are complaints, but we did see the complaint numbers lower last year and meet our performance goals of just under 4.6 complaints per 100,000 passengers. We talked about earlier the Pronto system. We've expanded that quite a bit with our partner programs. We implemented the online reduced fare application for Pronto, and we started open payment in July of this year. Talked about safety awards earlier. They were actually last week. It's one of my favorite times of the year. Sharon, our CEO, and myself and several other staff members go out and really take the time to thank and award and provide certificates and plaques and food and churros and lots of shaking of hands and congratulating them, thank them. More than 400 employees received awards this year. And we also had 14 new operators who qualified for the National Safety Council Million Mile Award. So they have operated accident-free for more than 1 million miles in their service to us. I believe we have nearly 250 recipients since we've been doing that. So, but 14 new ones this year. So, and I'm going to turn it over to our COO of Rail, Brian Riley.
Hey, good morning. My name is Brian Riley. I serve as the Chief Operating Officer here for the Rail Division. We're going to talk about some of the amazing things that we've done over the past year in the Rail Division. Start out here with the capital improvement. Most of our infrastructure that we operate on is maintained by MTS. So this is a very, very important part of our CIP program. First, we're going to talk a little bit about the track structure program that we have annually on a regular basis. We usually replace about 6 highway road grade crossings as well as stations and also just our regular track structure. This is on Commercial Street here. You can see between 16th and 20th, we completely replaced the track structure there all the way from the subgrade ties, rail, clips, all the way up to the surface. And what this does is it really provides a smooth transition wheel to rail interface for the trolleys, but also for any of the vehicles that are traveling out on commercial. So this is a 4-block project that we did on commercial. As I mentioned, we did 6 highway road grade crossings. This is Francis Street on the orange line. You can see that we had a weekend closure, AWW, absolute work window, where we shut it down and we went from the subgrade all the way up to the surface. This really provides a nice transition for vehicle traffic that operate over this crossing at Francis Street. This is 62nd Street out on the orange line. 62nd, not only did we do the grade crossing, we also did the station at 62nd. This was when we had the floods in January. It was a great opportunity for us to get in there. So we sent the contractors in and we were able to actually replace the crossing at that location, as well as all the track infrastructure inside of the 62nd Street station. Here's Massachusetts Avenue. This is another one that we took advantage of during the January flood recovery efforts, where we replaced all of the subgrade as well as the surface inside of the station there at Massachusetts Avenue Station. On the right, you see we have some asphalt crossings that are installed there. Those are temporary crossings that were installed at that time. We're currently actually installing prefabricated concrete crossings in there at that location, as well as 62nd Street. This is 27th Street grade crossing on the blue line. You can see this was another one of our AWWs where we went in and we completely took the track structure out all the way from subgrade up to the surface. And you see the prefabricated concrete ties in there. Generally, what we get out of one of these crossings is about a 20-year life cycle. So in our 20-year plan, we have all of our grade crossings mapped out to be able to be in the CIP program for the crossing replacement program. This is Civic Center. So once again, on the blue line, weekend closure where we went into Civic Center, removed the crossing, replaced the crossing at Civic Center on the blue line. This is in the downtown area. We had a couple crossings in the downtown area that we did during this cycle as well. This is 5th Avenue, 5th and C, weekend closure. You see on the left work being performed, and then on the right, the completed work. And then Park and Island up by Market Street Station, you can see this crossing has been completely replaced. That was another one of our crossings that was in the CIP program. Blue Line tie replacement program. A lot of folks probably don't think about the ties or the structure that's out there on the right of way. We generally replace about 10,000 ties annually. So this last cycle, we went in with a tie gang, bringing a big tie gang. It takes them about a month to go through, and they do the replacements at night while we provide some single track, and also when the system's shut down. They generally do about 400 to 500 ties per night, which is extraordinary. So this is the Blue Line tie replacement project. And that's a part of, as I mentioned, that's best management practice to do that. This is our FTA bridge inspection. This is a real preventative inspection that we do with one of our contractors. Jacobs actually won the procurement bid for this. And all of our infrastructure, as far as our elevated structure, which we have quite a bit of that up on the new Midcoast line, has to have these annual inspections. Why is this important? This is important so that we are preventative and we identify any potential voids or cracks inside of our foundations. Fortunately, there's none that were identified, but we do this on an annual basis here. Impedance bond, copper wire theft has been a real problem for us for many, many years. And over the last couple of years, we've really taken a real proactive posture where you can see to the left, there's wire that's exposed right there at Barrio Logan Station. And on the right, you see it's covered up with asphalt. This makes it less attractive to thieves and vandals to come in and try to steal the wire. And the purpose of stealing the wire is it has a very, very high recycle value. Problem with it is it becomes very, very problematic with us as far as safety, because these wires provide us the continuity that we need to communicate with our signaling system. The grade crossings, the crossings that operate at the crossing gates that operated the crossings. So we've taken a real proactive posture, and we cover up. Our target is about 60 of these annually, and so we're on task for that. Really important for us. Beautification projects. We had Director Dillard out for one of our projects that we did out at Grossmont Station. We did a mural project out there, and that project was done by one of our local artists here, Max Moses. It was a part of the Color of the Corridor project, and we did quite a few of these on the orange line And so this is out at Grossmont. You can see to the left, it looks just like just a blank canvas. And to the right, there's a beautiful beautification mural that's on the right. And this is on the trolley side. Not only did we do it on the trolley side, we also did it on the bus side. So this one here is on the bus side. You can see the difference there. Lots of great feedback that we've received on this beautification project. So we're real proud of this. We want to continue to do this. We have some other projects that are set up for and slated for us to do on the Blue Line down at East Street as well as Bayer Boulevard. Big belly trash can replacements downtown and on the Blue Line. This was a part of our social equity learning tour. And so you can see on the left, we had the barrel style trash cans inside of the stations in the downtown area as well as the Blue Line. Those trash cans, a lot of vandals come in, homeless, unhoused individuals will come in, and they'll ravage through the cans, and they'll leave the platforms just a mess. So we put in these big belly trash cans for security reasons, and they've worked out very, very well. They're in the downtown corridor. You'll see these on C Street, Park Boulevard, Convention Center corridor, as well as the entire Blue Line from Barrio Logan down to San Ysidro. Grantville Station, another beautification project that we take a lot of pride in. This is a part of, as we were doing the transit-oriented development project, we went in and we took a proactive posture and just really cleaned up the landscape there. If you look to the left, you'll see what it looked like prior to us actually doing the beautification project. And to the right, it looks like a completely different landscaped area and a different station. So that turned out very, very, very well. Surface, we did some surface treatments there at Grantville also, where we refreshed it to, blend in and look a lot better with the new transit-oriented development project out there. So you can see to the left before when the work was going on, and you can see the finished product to the right. We made a major investment in painting of the Grantville Station. The Grantville Station opened back in 2005. It was a part of our Mission Valley East Corridor, and it had not had a paint job since 2005. So we went in and we did a complete strip and paint job on the entire station. So a nice beautification project. Not only did we do the station, we also did all the outside infrastructure. So that's the Grantville Station painting project. Imperial Double Track project. This is a project that added capacity and efficiency for us. Down here on the south side of the building, there's a station there that's Imperial Terminal. That station originally had only a single track terminal, which is really problematic. Anytime you have a single track anywhere in your system, there's an inherent delays and capacity issues. So our agency, our CEO, gave us the green light to go ahead and make that a double track. So we've double tracked it, which connects the blue and the green. The construction was completed in December of 2023, and we went into operations in December of 2023. This is very, very important for us when we have large-scale events such as Comic-Con, to be able to have the capacity to run the frequency that we want to run to be able to provide the services necessary. If you look to the left, you'll see the single terminal. That was the way it was originally configured. And then to the right, you'll see where we have the double track terminal, where we have the ability to double occupy and run a higher frequency there at that location. El Cajon third track project. This is another project that has gotten just rave reviews. We've gotten a lot of really positive feedback with the third track project out at El Cajon. We created a separate terminal track out there for the service between El Cajon and Santee. That project was completed in August of 2024, and we went into service on September 29th. This is a celebration that we had and a press conference that we had out there on Friday, September 27th, just of the opening of the project. You can see that we had the representatives that are in the East County. We had Director Hall, Chairperson Whitburn, and we also had Vice Chair Goebel out for this celebration. It was a wonderful day. This is the El Cajon Train Operators Lounge. Since we actually made this the terminus at El Cajon, we had to put in a lot of other infrastructure there for our security as well as our train operators. Train operators have a nice area where they can lounge. And if you notice to the right there, you'll see it's all fenced in. It's got some camouflage that gives them an opportunity to take a break and have a rest break. They have a lounge where they can go inside of the lounge, the refrigerator, microwave, television, just try to make it as comfortable as we can for them when they're taking their breaks out there. Security's also out there. So a big enhancement with personnel at that location. 5000 series vehicle commissioning. We continue to receive our SD100 replacement vehicles. To date, we have received 16 of the 22 option vehicles, and those vehicles have been delivered to San Diego, 16 of them. We're in some stage of either static testing or dynamic testing, and for the most part, most of them have been put in service. Our target right now is to have all of the vehicles here in San Diego and in service by February of 2025. So a real exciting project for us. You can see here, this is the Siemens personnel from Sacramento. They are here on site and they are working around the clock with the commissioning program. This is just some more shots of the vehicles. You see the vehicles, they're out there operating. They usually have all of our MTS swag identifiers on them, the vehicle numbers that are on them. This is when we first get the vehicles. They just come with that beautiful red, iconic red that's on them. So 5071 through 5092 are the vehicles that we're going to be commissioning. Most of those vehicles, the majority of them have been commissioned. The MTS Rail Second Life program, a lot of you are probably aware that we have this special relationship with the province of Mendoza, Argentina, where we've actually sent a lot of vehicles down there to start up a system that's very similar to San Diego when we started. We started out back in 1981. This is 2024, so we've been in business for 43 years. Started out on a small system that was operating heavy rail. Mendoza's doing the same thing. So we sent vehicles down there, and they have their second life. So in 2012, we sent 13 U2 vehicles down to Mendoza. Most of those vehicles are still operating. We continue this relationship with them. To date, we've shipped 15 of the SD100 vehicles down to Argentina, Mendoza. This week, we hosted the Secretary of Transportation, Luis Barrega, also the President of SDTM, Daniel Villas, and also the project manager, Ruben Cornejo. And we also have 3 of their maintainers here on the property this week that we're providing training for them free of charge so that we can help them and we can partner with them to be able to have a system that's like ours. The 52 Siemens vehicles, just to put this in perspective, you know, 13 of those vehicles were recycled at a cost of $10,000 per vehicle. For us donating the 39 vehicles that we're donating to the province, we don't have to spend that money on recycling. They're paying to actually have the vehicle shipped down there, and they're paying us to actually take the vehicles apart, put them on the flatbeds that you see here, and to ship those down there with our personnel. So great relationship. That is a rich relationship, and we want to continue that relationship. I told the Secretary of Transportation when he was here, he was looking at our new vehicles and he walked in and he said, man, they smell brand new. I said, 30 years, we'll start shipping these down to you guys. Rail safety and operations. This is near and dear to us. Everything that we do at MTS particularly is geared around safety of the operations and the mechanics of what we do. You know, and we always benchmark ourselves and we compare and we compete. Not only do we compare and compete here in the great state of California, we also do it nationally. But this is the state of California, and this kind of shows you how we match up against our peers in California when it comes down to accidents. This is accidents per million passengers. You see San Diego to the left, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Sacramento, and Santa Clara. You can see San Diego performs very, very well at 0.68 accidents per million passengers, and then San Francisco and Los Angeles, and with Santa Clara VTA with 5.59 accidents per million passengers. We carry about 30 million passengers annually, so you can tell what that number looks like. This is per million revenue miles. Same exact peers that we matched ourselves and benchmarked ourselves against. You can see San Diego's performing very, very well at 2.8 accidents per million revenue miles. We operate about 4 million revenue miles, train miles annually. Washington Street grade crossing improvements. We received a letter from the FRA and the CPUC, a joint letter about this crossing. And this crossing was actually put in the top 100 crossings for accidents. When I read that letter, I said, hey, we got to do something about this. And Sharon agreed. Sharon said, we need to jump on this. So we took some mitigations at this location to provide more safety at this location, better safety at this location, particularly for pedestrians. The real issue that we were seeing here was that pedestrians were getting hit by high-speed trains at this location. Not the San Diego trolley trains, because we're generally we're leaving the station from a station stop, or we're coming to the station making a station stop. But you can see up in the left quadrant, the top quadrant there, that's the Mason wall that was previously at the location at Washington Street. If you look to the bottom quadrant, or excuse me, to the right quadrant, top quadrant, you'll see that that Mason wall has been reduced. We dropped that wall down and we put a see-through fence where you can actually see through it. Thanks to our capital team, Heather's team, we were able to do that pretty quickly. If you look to the bottom left corner, you'll see that also we put in a convex mirror for folks that are walking. They can actually see the high-speed trains that are coming. We also have surface applications that we put on the ground, look both ways before you cross. If you look to the right on the bottom, you'll see that there's back flashers on the crossing equipment also. San Diego, we had the FRA CPUC Grade Crossing Conference here in August. I never knew there was such a thing until they invited me to speak there. So I went there, I spoke at it, and they gave us an award for the work that we've done at Washington Street. The FR administrator, Amit Boss, really recognized and congratulated us for that work. So we're real proud of the work that's been done at Washington Street. We do a lot of things with outside agencies to make sure that they're familiarized with our equipment. We're unique when it comes down to lifting the light rail vehicle trains that, in the event we get into an accident. So we bring in the fire department. We train the fire department, local law enforcement, Department of Homeland Security. We do everything from heavy rescue training to how to basically lift the buses and how to access the buses and the trains. We also do active shooter behavior characteristic, pathway and violence methodology training, run, hide, or fight. We've done that throughout this year. And so here's some of the pictures of some of the heavy rescue and active shooter training that we do. As my colleague Mike mentioned, we train a lot. Hopefully this never happens, but if it does, we'll be prepared. So this is some of the training that we've done. Audits, we just went through a triannual audit with the California Public Utilities Commission. That's who we are regulated by the state of California with. That was an audit, a triannual audit. Generally, the triannual audits are every 3 years. We were in the cycle to have our audit during COVID, so we got missed. It was actually supposed to happen during COVID. We got missed, so now we're back in the cycle. So we're still waiting for our exit interview, and we'll let you know how we perform, but we believe we perform very, very well, based on everything that we know. Special events. Mike talked a little bit about the special events earlier. On the rail side of things, these special events just continue to increase and to become very, very active. We had over 236 special events in FY24, and we're on pace to surpass that in FY25. 226 of these events require extra service, meaning that it's not just our routine service that we're operating. We're putting out extra service, extra personnel to support these events. Roughly 2,700 extra trips were operated, and we carried an estimated million passengers, about 900,000 extra passengers for the events. And to the right, you can see just some of the events that we've actually provided service for. A lot of concerts, obviously the Padres. Wave is really picking up out of Snapdragon. Comic-Con, special event line that we implemented between Balboa and Imperial performed very, very well. We had some enhanced service on all the lines, orange, blue, and green, and extensive efforts from everyone at MTS to support Comic-Con. This is just kind of a snapshot of what Comic-Con looked like in 2023. We carried about 250,000 extra passengers in 2023 and about 265,000 extra passengers in 2024. So that's just a snapshot. Looking at the ridership at Comic-Con, you can see that just on the week prior to Comic-Con, opposed to the week of Comic-Con, the blue line had about a 31% increase in ridership. Orange was at 33%, and the green was at 79%. Special event line, we really couldn't, compare that because we only ran that line just for Comic-Con. That pretty much concludes my presentation for the rail division, and we'll ask if there's any questions, comments, or concerns. Thank you.
Thank you to each of you. Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
We do. Phone number ending in 3731. Please dial *6 to unmute yourself.
Hey, rule followers, it sounds like the mental cliff is continuing on. That's why I'd like to see future charts not exclude the years 2020 and 2021. I want the unnecessary damage from the lockdowns and lies fully exposed. No more blaming invisible killer dots. The passenger counts need to distinguish that those are not millions of unique rides, but just everybody racking up several rides a day. Lower routes passenger numbers going down, it seems like people have given up on MTS as a viable option. And an 18 times increase in subsidy, not good. And why are the circulator and express buses so high in subsidy cost? Does the Silver Line no longer exist because there's no average weekday passenger numbers for 2022 to 2024? The passenger per revenue hours, I disagree with the assertion that higher numbers mean more efficiency. It could mean that more people are being stuffed into a bus or that a bigger bus is now being used. And I'm going to give you guys two feedback on the third track Copper shuttle. One guy said, "It makes no sense. Why waste money on another car? It sounds like a scam." I wonder what Trump would have to say about this. I'd rather see an elevated trolley to TC with that money. And a second guy said, "I don't know what the F the Copper line is." So to save money and increase frequencies, I recommend getting rid of unused trolley stations like Massachusetts Avenue. We could even make people who want to go to that station rely on a bus shuttle that we could just call a new line. For the in-service hours, the 227 Rapid Ghost bus in Imperial Beach is never going to be a good investment when the city is unofficially boycotting it. Half of those buses are not even in service. The city is okay with the 933, the 934, and the 901 buses, but that Rapid 227 wastes of money, just like all of the expensive fire-prone electric buses. I'm very concerned about whatever DHS is up to with those active shooter drills and whatever else they were up to on August 7th and 14th. I wish I was impressed by some more of the projects other than, ironically, the trash cans, but thanks for all of the photos of the projects in the report. I would also like a churro or to at least see a picture of some churros. Thank you.
That concludes public comment, Chair.
Thank you, Clerk. Let's open board discussion on this item, and we'll begin with Director Leyva Gonzalez.
In regards to the CIP
Chair,
projects.
I don't think his microphone is on. Oh.
I have an outside voice. Yeah. So the CIP projects that you guys had mentioned, with the work being done, performed by the rail, that work is being performed in-house by MTS employees, or it's being outsourced to outside contractors?
On the rail side, we outsource the big projects. So like the track projects, the inspections that you see, those are all go through the procurement process and the CIP program. So generally, those kind of projects aren't our routine maintenance. We'll have those go out to for competitive bid process, and we'll have outside contractors perform that work for us.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate you guys.
Thank you, Director Leyva Gonzalez. Director Moreno.
I don't have to press anything, right?
Nope,
okay, wonderful. This is a great presentation, and I want to thank you guys for the work that you are doing and that you continue to do. Me as having sat here now since 2019, have been a really big stickler on the passenger experience, the ridership experience, and the ridership cliff that we were looking at a few years ago. But part of bringing our ridership back is a lot of the work that you guys do. I want to commend you guys and just MTS in general. The equity study that you guys did just really set us in a good place to receive a lot of the SB 125 money that we finally got. That's going to help with a lot of work that you guys do. Even the social media at MTS has been so amazing, and I've been mentioning it. I know that the ZEB transition is, I always mention it, is something that this board is really interested in. But I'm really happy to see that the passenger levels have gone up, and I think it speaks volumes to the work that Mike and Brian and Dennis are doing. We're going to continue pushing. We do have the transit amenities study that is going to come forward that should address some of the issues that were even brought up at this meeting. I know we talked about where you put your card. What is that called? The vending, the validators. We talked about the validators a few months ago and how we're going to be looking at continue to push on the transit riders experience, because we do want more riders. But in order to get more riders, we need to continue to push for amenities and securities. And lastly, I really can't emphasize and thank you guys enough for the work that you guys did after the January 22nd flood. It was, Brian, it was amazing, especially compared to some of the cities. I couldn't believe you guys had everything up and running so quickly, and commend the staff for all the work that they did, the chain that they made, the human chain they made to help folks over at the shelter was just fantastic work. And I can't stop applauding you guys for the good work that you guys have done. I'm a stickler, you guys know that, but I also share, and I also thank you guys when you guys do tremendous work, and you three have been just phenomenal. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Director Moreno. And I will echo that applause for Mr. Desmond and Mr. Wygant and Mr. Riley. There's so much to applaud here, the metrics, all the improvements, the recognitions. So thank you for the good work and for the presentation, sharing all that with the board. All right, that concludes that item. No motion is necessary there. We'll move on to item 27, and that is for any communications by board members or the CEO, and we'll go to our CEO.
Yes, I'm pleased to tell you that we did a national search for our Chief Information Officer. We had brought in technical experts from the port, the county, Orange County Transportation Authority. We held multiple rounds of interviews, and we made our selection, and that individual started on Monday. His name is Ernesto Garcia. And I will tell you, Ernesto, selected from all of this national search, he's a 19-year MTS employee, and we're glad to promote from within.
Very good. Congratulations, Mr. Garcia. Let's go to Vice Chair Goebel.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick thank you to the staff for the implementation of the copper line. That was a huge effort across many departments: trolley operations, safety, scheduling, planning, construction services, even the bus operators, were patient through all of the construction fencing and materials. So it has gone very well. I've been to the platform several times. Marketing, I forgot marketing. Thank you for your efforts. The effort has gone very well. We still see ambassadors there helping people, yelling out green line here, orange line there. And it's a safe thing. There's a lot of people around, and it was very well done. So a very professional job. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Goebel. All right, well, that brings us to the end of our agenda today. The next Board of Directors meeting is scheduled for November 14th at 9 o'clock in the morning. We are adjourned.